I'm very excited to show you the start of my Astra Militarum army by painting up this squad of Tempestus Aquilons, and I'll tell you how it was all inspired by a dune buggy. Howdy y'all, this is Patrick at Bombshell Miniatures. When I was reading Hammer and Anvil, I came across this description of a vehicle that the sisters used to travel across the desert terrain of Sanctuary 101. After a bit of research online, I found out that this little dune buggy was also a staple vehicle in a regiment of Imperial Guard known as the Elysian Drop Troops. Shortly after that, I fell down a giant rabbit hole reading about the drop troops online. This immediately prompted me to collect my own drop troops army of some kind. When Hivestorm was released for Kill Team, I knew the Tempestus Aquilons would be at the core of my Astra Militarum regiment, even though at that point I had only an unbuilt box of shock troops in my collection. Since then I started collecting various Militarum units for my regiment over the past year, and waited for some of them to return in plastic since I missed out on the Forge World versions. Without a firm idea towards what I wanted to do with them, other than a rough sketch towards something drop troopy, I filled out the rest of the collection with what I thought may be themed support units. After seeing Dana Howell's video about playing narrative games of 40K as a Crusade campaign, the idea started to solidify towards a starting core 1,000 point force. The campaign would take place in the Gideon system detailed in the Wrath and Glory role-playing game setting. This would give me a chance to develop my own background lore, regimental colors, and unit selection with an eye towards narrative gameplay. Last year I made quite a lot of progress on my Sororitas army by participating in the Independent Characters Podcast annual Hobby Progress Challenge. This organized my hobby progress into picking a unit each month to build and paint while sharing my completed models with their online community. When they started up the new challenge this summer, I knew this would be the opportunity for me to build the drop troop regiment that I had been collecting. If you're interested in checking out the Hobby Progress Challenge, pop on over to the ICP webpage. The link is in the description below. Once all of the Aquilons were built, then I just needed to primer them, so I used ProAcryl's black-brown primer through my airbrush. This has a very smooth and matte finish to it that's great to paint over. So then, in order to start working on the armor bits, I used a little bit of black-brown primer and mixed that in with the bone color in order to create some lighter areas on their carapace armor. Here it was just a matter of going, on each piece of that and trying to stay within the lines. I kind of brushed on that in a sort of a dabbing motion in order to create sort of a splotchy look to the carapace armor. I didn't want it to be an all-over even coat because in subsequent stages I planned on doing a lot of weathering to the armor and to their uniforms in order to make them look grimy and sort of inhabit that kind of grimdark feel. Since this particular squad of Tempestus Aquilons was from my Hivestorm set, I initially thought about the color schemes for their uniforms being in sort of a ash waste gray color. So that was one of the reasons why I started with the black-brown primer to give sort of a dark base undercoat to that and then work lighter up over the top of it. I still wanted their fabric uniforms in order to be dark, and I wanted the carapace pieces to be a lighter color. So that was originally, that's why I just went ahead and sprayed them all as like a dark black-brown color and then worked up this over the top. So then it was just a matter of going in and picking the panels and the helmets and so forth that I wanted to create in this bone color. I also really didn't bother with working on the trim on their breastplate. There's a bunch of, it looks like riveted trim around the outside of it, which I guess you could paint as like a metallic color and that sort of a thing, but I really sort of looked at this as more like you know, Star Wars Stormtrooper armor where it looked like it was preformed or like vacuum formed or something on them. And so I thought that this sort of light armor color against the dark uniform sort of made that sort of Stormtrooper look, even though it's, you know, different settings. So after I got the color that was sort of the 50-50 ivory, or in this case bone, and black-brown color blocked in on all of the armor panels, I went back with just the straight bone color, and with kind of an older brush, I went in and sort of stippled and created a tapping sort of effect in order to create a mottled looking surface to the armor, as if there was dirt or grime or you know, battle damage or something like that, in order to give them a little bit of a more weathered look. Now, even though the bone color that I'm using here is really bright against the dark brown uniform, once we do sort of a unifying wash and so forth over that, then it'll sort of tone that down and give it a really grimy and dirty sort of a look. After I got all the panels blocked out, then I went back with this dark gray color and sort of highlighted, not really like an edge highlight, but I did want to create a little bit more contrast on the fabric parts of their uniform by highlighting that up a little bit. So I just worked my way around the model and picked out any of the creases or folds where the highest points were in their fabric uniform. And this created a little bit more contrast in between the darkest folds on the fabric and the edges. It's not really edge highlighting in a way, but it is creating a little bit more contrast. And that will be smoothed out and punched up just a little bit more once we do the wash over that. I continued blocking out the different parts of the uniform that I wanted to set apart by using this dark umber color in order to paint all of the straps and the webbing and so forth on their uniform. This also kind of broke up the overall gray color and brought a little bit more warmth back into it, as opposed to it being just solid gray. After getting all the base colors for the straps finished up, then I wanted to move on and block out the colors for the weapons. So in this case, I used Payne's Gray, just straight out of the bottle to, well, I mean, I thinned it, but I didn't mix any other colors into it. So I just used the straight color in order to block out the base colors of the weapons. And to me, it's once I go through the rest of the process, this gives the guns a really blued black kind of a color, and it to me it looks a little bit more natural than just a pure black on it. It gives a little bit more life and a little bit more contrast between the creases and the shadows and so forth, and the highlights on the edges. So then once all of the weapons were blocked in, I went back with this ivory color and gave it just a really, really light dry brush in order just to hit the edges of stuff, particularly on the backpack. That way the corners and the edges of everything had a little bit of a highlight to them, which would also emphasize the contrast in the washes that we were going to do afterwards. So in this instance, rather than going to the trouble of messing with, oil washes or enamels or anything like that, I just went straight to ProAcryl's brown wash and just did an overall unifying kind of a dip in this instance, which, like I was talking about before, it really tones down that bone and the ivory color and starts to kind of pull all of that stuff together. Then I went over the weapons, the guns, with the black wash, which again toned all of that down and brought the value of it down, I guess, and gave it a more of a black look. But again, those highlights popped out and really defined the shape of the parts. After that was dry, I went back with a mix of white and the Payne's gray color in sort of a really crisp highlight, so that I could go back and hit just those corners and just those edges kind of on the tops of things. And I used the tip of an old brush so that it would be it would give chips, and so it would look like worn areas and damage or whatever along those edges and corners where the equipment would crash into stuff, or it would be scraped, or the paint would come off and that kind of thing. Using a straight bone color, I went back and went ahead and highlighted the edges and also dabbed a little bit more color onto the armor panels in order to bring those back up and have a little bit more of that lighter color show through. This isn't really edge highlighting again. I'm just going around and hitting some of the edges with kind of a stippling, a tapping sort of an effect, in order to have a little bit of that white color come through where the wash had toned it down. So there again, it sort of punches up the contrast along those edges and so forth. From there, I went ahead and put down a base color of white over the plasma coils on the plasma gun, in addition to their helmet lenses and other targeting lenses and so forth. There's also a little, I guess it's some kind of a Auspex kind of a readout on their left forearm panel, and so I went ahead and blocked that out in white also. Anything that I wanted to show up as glowing or lit up, I went ahead and just put a base color of white over that, so that I could tint that afterwards with transparent colors. Once the white was dry on their wrist panel, I don't know, Auspex or Pip-Boy or whatever it is that they have, I went back and added a little bit of yellow over the top of that to create sort of a green glowing effect after I put the blue over it. So in this instance, I wanted to use this Caribbean Ocean Speedpaint, which is a really bright sort of a blue whenever you paint it over white like this. And I thought the effect really lent itself to looking like there was some kind of glowing light underneath their lenses or in the plasma coils or so forth, and it was really quick and easy to do. This is the first time that I'd really used speed paint like that, so I like the way that it flowed and I like the way that it covered. It really worked out sort of well, creating the green sort of glow that I wanted on their little Auspex readout. Then moving on to do the stuff on the base, I wanted sort of a rusty, worn look, some more weathering and so forth on there, so I used a couple of orange and brown colors to create some details on some of their, tactical ducting or whatever this stuff is that they're standing on, this debris, urban rubble and so forth. So I went around and I created just some, again, sketchy sort of motions in order to create these little rust patches and so forth on there with lighter and darker shades of orange. But then I thinned that down into sort of a wash kind of a consistency so that it would be really thin and run down the panel lines and in between the creases and so forth where water would collect, I guess, if there was some sort of a acid rain or something. And then once I got all of that done, it was just a matter of adding a little rim to the base and then doing a little matte spray varnish to finish them off. Thanks for sticking around to see how they turned out. If you enjoyed seeing the process, click that like button down below. The rest of the regiment is in the works, so be sure to subscribe and click that bell if you'd like to be notified whenever I post more progress. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time on the workbench.